theme, as we have there on the screen, go your ways and pour out the vials of the wrath of God. Now, last evening, as we tracked through a portion of Revelation 11, we were amazed and thrilled at the inspirational accuracy of God's word and prophecy. So early in the piece, change the microphone. And what we did was we worked through, in brief, this timeline that we have there. And what we found, brothers and sisters, is we got to the end there and we saw how the witnesses fell down in 1685 after 113 years of being killed. Finally, they were utterly, completely, politically and religiously gagged. And they will remain in that state for a period of 105 years. But the witnesses were coming back. And they were going to stand on their feet. And they were going to become a platform, a springboard, to bring us into this 16th chapter of the book of Revelation. And what we see as the witnesses begin to stand, we see is a train coming down the track, and it is out of control. So as the witnesses stand up in France, we find, brothers and sisters, we are now here at young people in 1789. France is in absolute peril, going down the drain, quick smart. Louis XVI is facing a crisis he has never met before. And there is the French assembled parliament, called together by Louis XVI, the King of France. And we pick up the theme as we use this as a springboard into Revelation chapter 16. We pick up the words in Revelation chapter 11 and verse 12, and we read these words. And they heard a great voice from heaven saying to them, "Come up hither." And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. These heavens here, brothers and sisters, young people, is the political heaven of France. And it's Louis that's calling them and saying, "Come up hither." He's in a crisis. He's assembling the Estates General. There's a desperate attempt by Louis XVI to stave off civil unrest. Here we are, May the 5th, 1789, and he calls the Estates General together. It was something out of the box. This French assembled parliament had not met for 175 years. Now they met. This is way out of the box. This is something for the prophetic word to record. And Louis brings them, calls them up like a great cloud. And this Estates General was established in 302, being a French legislative body comprising of three groups or states of society. So they had the clergy, they had the nobility, and they had the commoners. But they had a strange voting system. They voted by groups. So, pardon me, if you were a member of the clergy and you had 500 members, you get one vote. If you're a member of the nobility, you had 5,000 members, one vote. If you're a member of the commoners and there were 500,000, didn't matter, one vote. So when they got together, when they did meet, the clergy and nobility could get together, very small in number, and they could win the day. And the commoners made up 98% of the nation. And the two, clergy and nobility, coming together, making up 2%, and they swayed the day as far as their requirements and their vote was concerned. So Louis got them together and said, "We're in trouble. The country's going down the drain. We need to get bread on the table. We need you to get together to try and solve the crisis." Well, you know, brothers and sisters and young people, Louis' financial advisor came to him and said, "You better get your house in order." Louis said, I know it's a desperate situation. What do I do?" And the financial advisor came to Louis and said, "Stop spending." Well, Louis went to his wife, Marie, "What'd you do?" in times of crisis. And he went to his wife and said, my financial advisor told me to stop spending. What do I do? She said, sack him. And they did. They called Marie Antoinette Madame Deficit. She was not going to stop spending. And therefore, Louis said, get together, try and work it out. Well, they got together and they were working it out. Week went by, another week went by. And Louis came to them and said, have you sorted out the problem? They said, no. Louis said, what are you doing? We're trying to work out how to vote. They spent week after week after week sorting out how they were going to vote. They didn't trust those fellows over there, and those fellows didn't trust those fellows over there. And then we said, what are you doing? We're trying to figure out how to vote. Get on with it, he said. We've got to work out this crisis. And as the weeks went by, in the end, the commoners were listening, they were engaged in discussion. The commoners said, hey, we're 98%. We can go alone. We don't need the clergy. We don't need the nobility. We can go alone. And the commoners became emboldened as week went by. And therefore, the commoners, or the Third Estate, voted in June the 17th to make themselves a permanent national assembly with or without the other two. Louis' efforts to repress the new assembly caused widespread rioting and ushered in the French Revolution. Well, brothers and sisters, young people, they stood upon their feet. There was a great shaking. This was the second great earthquake in the apocalypse, the French Revolution. There was the new National Assembly, the Third Estate, the commoners, and they issued a decree proclaiming liberty of opinions, religious and political. They'd been dead for 3.5 days, 105 years, and now they're back, and they're proclaiming religious and political liberty. Have a look at this verse. Verse 13. This is the springboard now into Revelation 16. Revelation 13, the same hour, that's 30 years. Once this revolution got moving, this great political and social upheaval earthquake, there would be a 30-year period of aftershock. That was Napoleon. That was the 30-year career of Napoleon, as he was going to unwittingly pour out vial after vial after vial on Catholic Europe. 1 hour. So here we are, in the same hour, it was the great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell, France. And in the earthquake, there was slain of men, 7,000, and the remnant were afraid. Now, there weren't 7,000 people slain in the French Revolution. What does your margin say for those who may not be so familiar? What's the margin say when we look at 7,000 men were slain? Names of men. So here we've got 7,000 names. 7 complete titles were obliterated. You couldn't call yourself a marquis. You weren't allowed to call yourself a duke. You had to be addressed as citizen. Louis XVI could not be addressed as sire or your majesty. Louis had to be addressed as citizen Louis. They abolished titles. But, brothers and sisters, God doesn't waste words. Not only were 7 complete titles obliterated in the French Revolution, the word that we read is 7,000. Why 1,000? Well, if you were to go back to Judges 6, Gideon said, my family is the least of all families in Judges 6. And when you look at your margin, I am the least of all thousands. So 1,000 and family are used synonymously. So what the Bible's telling us here is not just titles were obliterated, family titles, hereditary titles. And that's how they were set up in France. You got a title because of your birth. So God does not waste words. He said, we're talking about the abolishment, complete family titles obliterated in the French Revolution. amazing thing, brothers and sisters. And therefore, we have, if you were an aristocrat, and if you did have a title, you're gone. Even if you were suspected of being an aristocrat with a title, you were gone. A breath of opposition to the course of events in the French Revolution. If you challenge the revolution, you will be headed. They were standing on their feet. We aren't entered in, brothers and sisters, young people now, to the reign of terror. 4 years on, we're now in 1793 through 1794. The scene now is set for the opening of Revelation and chapter 16. So, brothers and sisters and young people, as we said last evening, the connecting point, when we are in Revelation 11 and verse 14, we read, the second woe is past. There is the second woe. Remember? Woe trumpet 1, woe trumpet 2, woe trumpet 3. The second woe is past. And behold, the third woe comes quickly. That is why we go from Revelation 11. Now, from the revolution in France, we bounce, we spring, we are propelled into Revelation 16, which would be the third one of these 7 vials. We're in Revelation 16 and verses 1 through 11, these first 5 vials. And so, brothers and sisters and young people, now we enter into the 16th chapter, and these first 5 vials of Revelation 16 were all about God's judgment on Catholic Europe. They were all about bringing an end to an empire that had existed for over 1,000 years. God is going to raise up a man of destiny, that man, to bring an end to the Holy Roman Empire that had existed for 1,000 years. And God's going to raise up this man of destiny, and he's going to give them blood to drink. Well, you read about, don't you, in verse 6 of Revelation and chapter 16. So verse 6, for they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy. A man of destiny. Napoleon emerged from the French Revolution. In fact, Napoleon was 20 years of age when the revolution broke out. So as a teenager, he could see this train out of control coming down the track. And as a man, he used the French Revolution to propel him to stardom. He was a man of destiny. And historians tell us that Napoleon was the greatest commander, the greatest military tactician since Alexander the Great. He was a man of destiny. But he had a few problems. As great as he was, he had a few problems. One of his problems was Napoleon was born there, in Corsica. Why was that a problem? Well, a few years before Napoleon was born, the French came and they conquered Corsica. And therefore, Napoleon grew up absolutely hating the French. Do you believe that? Absolutely hating the French. And not only so, Napoleon could hardly speak the French language. He had a thick Corsican accent. And therefore, to add to Napoleon's problems, Napoleon was only 5'6". It's about there. So, brothers and sisters, here's a man who hates the French, can hardly speak the French language, 5'6", and 10 years after the revolution broke out in 1799, this 5'6", hates the French, can hardly speak the language, walks in 1799 in the coup d'etat and says, I am your first and chief consul. I am your leader. No way, brothers and sisters and young people, would that have happened in the normal scheme of things. But God was in control. And the angels were at work. And therefore, brothers and sisters, Napoleon, the heir to the revolution, reorganised France, and pretty much conquered all of Europe. Therefore, we now spring into Revelation and chapter 16. Now, what we want to do, brothers and sisters, is we want to do what we did in Revelation 11. Before we have a look at some of the detail of Revelation 16, we want to have a look at a scaffold, a broad brushed picture of this 16th chapter, and then we'll go back, particularly these first 11 verses, which we're going to be looking at, which are the first 5 vials. Then we'll go back and we'll look at some of the detail to give some richness to the drama of this chapter. Now, like Revelation 11, this chapter culminates in a great earthquake. This is the third great earthquake. We have there in verse 18. Now, someone has put Armageddon next to this third great earthquake. That's not correct. Armageddon is the last event of the 6th vial. Armageddon, there will be a literal earthquake at Armageddon. Armageddon is the last event of the 6th vial. We are here with this third great earthquake. We are in the 7th vial. Verse 17, the 7th angel pointed his vial into the area, the political arena of Babylon the Great. Therefore, this third great is not Armageddon. It is that 40-year period between Armageddon and the beginning of the millennium. It is a political and social upheaval of the kingdom of men. So your 3 great earthquakes in the Apocalypse, the removal of paganism in chapter 6, the removal of the Catholic hierarchy and the French aristocracy in Revelation 11, and here the removal of the kingdom of men, giving way to the kingdom of God. Not Armageddon, but that 40-year shaking politically and socially throughout this world. Now, having said that, let's have a look at a brief overview of Revelation 16 and then go and drill down to some of the detail. What we've got here, brothers and sisters and young people, we're going to first vial. There in verse 2. So the first vial was poured out upon the earth. Talk about the earth in a moment, what the earth was. And there was a grievous sore, a noisome and grievous sore that fell upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and those of which is in. That's our first bowl or our first vial. We come into verse 3 and we read that the second vial was poured out upon the sea. And it became as the blood of a dead man. Now, the blood of a dead man, well, the blood of a dead man is congealed. It doesn't flow. Now, I want you to note something here. There's an interesting comparison or connection between verse 3 and verse 8. No, and verse 4. So there's an interesting connection between verse 3 and verse 4. Because in verse 3, the sea becomes as the blood of a dead man. It congeals. It dries up. There's no flow of blood. So what God does here, he says, stop the flow of blood, whatever that means. We'll explore it. Stop the flow of blood in the second vial in order that there might be a copious flow of blood in the third vial. Have a look at this. The third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and fountains of waters, and they became blood. Vial 2, stop the flow of blood. Vial 3, let blood flow with alacrity, with celerity. Let it be copious. Let it be like the fountains and rivers of waters. Let it be not water anymore, but let it be blood. It's a very interesting. I'm going to show you in a moment how that the second vial overarches vial 3, vial 4, and vial 5 to make sure vial 3, 4, and 5 take place. Stop the flow of blood in order that blood might flow with alacrity in the third vial. Amazing. Wait and see how that works. If we come to our fourth vial in verse 8, and the fourth angel poured out his bowl upon the sun, and power was given to him, whoever him was, to scorch men with fire. Amazing the way that is fulfilled, as we shall see. And then our fifth vial in verse 10, the fifth angel poured out his bowl upon the throne as it should be of peace, and his kingdom was full of darkness. And that's our brief for this morning. God willing, our study tomorrow afternoon will take us into the 6th vial of verse 12, and then our studies, God willing, on Wednesday evening will take us into the 7th vial in verse 17. And what I want to do is just one more little overview, but with an introduction to this overview, and then we'll come in and look at some of the detail. A little bit more overview, a little bit more detail. And brothers and sisters, I want to begin this little section, a couple of minutes section, with the words of Revelation 15 and verse 1. And these are God's alarm bells that ought to ring in our ears. This is really how the 16th chapter was introduced, in order that we might get our house in order, in order that we might get our ecclesias in order, in order that we might get our hearts right before God. God gives us a warning. Verse 1, Revelation 15. And I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvellous, 7 angels having the 7 last smitings. There are no more after this, God says. These are the last. You've seen me judge pagan Rome through the seals. You've seen me bring judgment on the Latin West in the Christian world with the 4 Germanic barbarians. You've seen me through the agency of the Saracens bring judgment on the Hellenic East. You've seen me with the Turks bring judgment upon the Hellenic East and the Hellenized East through the Saracens and the Hellenic East through the Turks. You've seen me bring judgment upon France. You've seen all of those things. God says, well, these are the last. There are no more after these. So take that in our minds, brothers and sisters, and let those alarm bells ring in our ears. And with that, the first Bible was poured out on the earth. Now, I've got there the French Revolution, 1789. You'll read many writings that say 1792. Don't have a problem with that. 1792 was when France became a republic. And when France became a republic, that stirred up the ire of Europe. And that provoked Europe to move against France, which then provoked France to move against Europe, 1792. And this malignant ulcer we read of in Vial 1 sprung out of France and then permeated throughout all of Europe. I have no problem if you have a little note in your margin saying the first Bible begins with 1792, France becoming, no problem with that at all. But it began with the French Revolution. This malignant ulcer spilled throughout Europe began locally first within France. That's why I prefer to have, from my perspective, 1789. Then the second bowl was poured out, and we see it was poured out on the sea. It's the Brits. Out come the Brits, ruled the tank. Britain ruled slaves in 1793. So while France was undergoing awful bloodshed, awful terror in the reign of terror, and Louis XVI in 1793 had his head removed. Marie Antoinette in 1793 had a head guillotine. Well, all of that was going on in France. Out come the Brits, rule Britannia, the second Bible. Then we come to the third Bible in 1796. And this would be Napoleon's Alpine campaigns. This is where Napoleon came into his own. He's 27 and he's a major general. So 27-year-old major general is off to kick the Austrians out of northern Italy and southern Switzerland on this third Vial. Major general, 27-year-old Napoleon, and off he goes. Then the fourth Vial was poured out in 1805. Now this would be Napoleon's European wars. He's going to Vienna. He's going to take out the sun. But he's not 27-year-old Major General. He is now Emperor Napoleon and has been for 1 year. So off goes Emperor Napoleon to take out the sun, Vienna. And then we have 1808, the Papacy would not escape. And Napoleon would deal with the Pope. and Italy. And then we have, to finish off that little chart, 1820, and we have the Ottoman empires. Oh, brothers and sisters, young, so what? Who cares about a bunch of French history that happened over 200 years ago? Who cares? God does. The angels do. So do we. Because very soon, these stepping stones that the angels have been outworking for us, very soon, because we are interested in what the angels have been doing, very soon we are going to complete that work with the seventh vial in the words of Revelation 18 and verse 21. Thus with vials shall that great city Babylon be thrown down and shall be found no more at all. That is why we are interested. I don't mean you have to have a detailed knowledge of history, but we are interested in what the Bible says about men that God has raised up to fulfill his purpose. And therefore, brothers and sisters, this man that God raised up, this man of destiny, there he is at his coronation in 1804, wearing Caesar's crown. He wanted to be Caesar. He wanted to be Constantine. He wanted to be Alexander the Great and greater. Napoleon wanted to be anything that was greater than the greatest. Here he is. And he was an unwitting instrument in the judgment on the Holy Roman Empire and on the Catholic Church. Do you know, Napoleon saw himself as an instrument of providence. This is what he said about himself. I am the instrument of providence. She. No, Napoleon, you've got it wrong. He. It's God, not she. He. Napoleon said, she will use me as long as I accomplish her desires. And then she will break me as a glass. And God did. God used Napoleon for this, for this, for this, for this. And then in Waterloo in 1815, God broke him as a glass. His work was finished. End of those first 5 vials. And therefore, Napoleon, in his campaigns, brought untold suffering to Italy, Austria, and Prussia. And it would be fitting vengeance for the blood of God's servants and the anti-papal witnesses of Revelation of Lebanon, who had been persecuted mercilessly in previous centuries. And so, brothers and sisters, we pick up the first vial and we quickly move through this, taking the eyes out of each of these vials. Just check my watch so that you don't have to surreptitiously look at it. Yes, I'm aware of the time. Just kind of like almost 20 to 12 or about quarter to 12 in case you don't. All right. The first vial is poured out upon the earth. Now, this earth is the Roman earth. Now, we've already been to Revelation 11 and verse 4, where the witnesses stood against the God of the earth, the Papacy. So this first vial of judgment is going to be poured out upon the Roman earth, upon the Holy Roman Empire, the earth. Now, when you look at the Holy Roman Empire, there was when it began in 800 AD, with the introduction of Charlemagne, Charles the Magnificent, Karl, they call him, K-A-R-L. Interesting, brothers and sisters, that a Frank, Charlemagne, Frenchman, a Frank brought the Holy Roman Empire in. And a Frenchman, albeit born in Corsica, but he certainly waved the French flag when he was emperor, a Frenchman would take it out. Charlemagne brings it in, Napoleon takes it out. The French bring it in, the French take it out. The Holy Roman Empire. Now that's how the Holy Roman Empire looked at the beginning in 800 AD. Add a few hundred years to this, and you see that the Holy Roman Empire, the earth, contracts eastward. Add another couple of hundred years to the Holy Roman Empire, and you can see there is the lie of the land in 1530. This was pretty much the lie of the land in these vials in Revelation 16. Now you can see France is ruling within her own right. France was loosely connected to the Holy Roman Empire via a series of marriages, like Louis XVI married Marie Antoinette, and Marie Antoinette was the daughter of the emperor in Austria, the Holy Roman Empire. So France was loosely connected via marriages to the Holy Roman Empire, but reigning in their own right. So when we talk about the earth, we're talking about the earth beats of Revelation 13. The first fire was poured out on the earth, the Holy Roman Empire. And then we read, brothers and sisters and young people, there was a noisome and grievous sword. In the Greek, it literally is, there was an evil, for noisome, it was an evil, malignant ulcer. Now, the RSV translates it this way. There was a foul and painful sore that came upon all those who had the mark of the beast. And we're going to have a look at this malignant ulcer. Now, there is the Holy Roman Empire as it was in 1795. So there's the Holy Roman Empire there. And the malignant ulcer would spring out of France, 1792, when France became a republic, and it would permeate throughout all of the earth, the Holy Roman Empire. And the reason, brothers and sisters, is because of their cooperation, France's cooperation with the Papacy in the persecution of the witnesses in Revelation 11. It began locally, this awful malignant ulcer began locally, this revolution, this spirit of bloodshed and revolution as the ulcer, and that spirit would then spread right throughout all of Europe. Brothers and sisters and young. God had put a great big rope around this area, like a big fence, and said to Napoleon, although Napoleon didn't hear it in so many words, and God said to Napoleon, you belong there. Stay in your paddock. That's the arena within which you have work to do for me. Tell that to Napoleon. Nah, I'm going to Egypt. And he went down to Egypt. It was a disaster. Oh, he had a few successes in Palestine, a few little successes with the Mamelukes. It was a disaster. He went down into Egypt, and finally, brothers and sisters and young people, he had to leave 30,000 of his men stranded because he had no boats left. And he had to dress up in disguise and get his way back on his own, leaving 30,000 men in Egypt, and get back to France, get back to Paris. You do not belong in Egypt. He was defeated. Thought about taking England. No way. There's no way you could cross the Channel with the Brits ruling the oceans, rule Britannia. No. He thought twice about taking England, and he was defeated even in his mind. No way. All right, I'll go to Russia, which he did. And he went to Russia with 600,000 of the Grand Army. 600,000. And 500,000 of them perished in the snow because of the weather. God was working. You do not belong in Russia. You do not belong in England. You do not belong in Egypt. You belong there, in the earth, the Holy Roman earth. And therefore, brothers and sisters and young people, every time Napoleon fought a battle in that paddock that God had intended him to work, he was always victorious. Until Waterloo. But then God had finished with him and broke him as a glass. What an amazing. Well, here comes the second one. Here comes the rule of Britannia. Now, here's why. Here's why God introduced this second vial to congeal the flow of blood in order that Napoleon might fulfill vials 3, 4, and 5, and that the work might be complete as God determined it should. The second angel brought out his vial on the sea. This would be the blockade of Europe by the maritime forces of Britain. stop the flow of trade. There would be no sea traffic allowed on the oceans while Britain was there. Britain would dominate the oceans. And therefore, this sea are the Mediterranean seas, the Mediterranean and the seas that were surrounding Europe. So God put a great big rope around Europe to keep Napoleon in the path within which God had intended him to work. And God was going to pit the maritime genius of Horatio with the genius of the land fighter, Napoleon. They were going to be pitted one against the other. But Napoleon, brothers and sisters, saw the need to get rid of the Brits. He saw the need to get rid of the British Navy. They were restricting him. He wanted to go out, because there's no standing in that paddock. So therefore, Napoleon said, we've got to put all our strength on the sea. We've got to destroy England. And the continent will be at our feet. Now, what I want to do, brothers and sisters, we'll just tell you one little story for a minute or two about how this overarching second vial was put there by God, the rope around Europe by England and their maritime forces to make sure Napoleon did not stray out of his path. I'll show you how that worked. In 1805, Trafalgar, the Battle of Trafalgar, Britain completely dominated the seas and did so for the next 50 years. Let's look at this timeline and see how this overarching second vial compelled Vial 3, 4, and 5 to be complete. We've got the first vial on the Earth, 1789 through 1793. Then we've got our second vial on the sea, so through 1793 to 1805. We make the point here that Britain would dominate for the next 50 years after Trafalgar, after 1805. So let's push the Brits' influence on the seas out another 50 years. Now, here's your third vial in the paddock that God intended Napoleon to work. Overarched by the Brits, making sure he did that job. Here's your fourth vial. Overarched by the Brits to make sure he stayed in his paddock. Here's your fifth vial. Overarched by the Brits to make sure he stayed in his paddock. See? Therefore, brothers and sisters, I just want to show you how it really did work. How the Brits compelled Napoleon to wake up and get out of where he was, where he should not have been, and get back into his paddock. And this is a story how the Brits overarching this third vial. What happened was, there was this battle called the Battle of the Nile. And it took place at Abu Qir in Egypt. Now, there's the Bay of Abu Qir there. Napoleon's going to Egypt. Why? Because Alexander went there. Where are you going next? I'm going to Palestine. Why? Because I'm going to use that as a springboard into India. Why? Because Alexander went there. And after I've been in Palestine, I'm going to go up to Constantinople. Why? Because I'm going to use that as a springboard. I'm going to go into India and I'm going to cut off the trade to the Brits. I'm going to destroy Britain, not by conquering her across the channel. I'm going to destroy Britain by cutting off her trade, her lifeline to India. So he's going down to Egypt. He's going to kick out the Mamelukes who ruled in Egypt. He's then going to go up to Palestine. He's going to go up to Constantinople. And then he's going to go to India to be greater and greater than Alexander. So off he goes. 47,000 men he's got. He comes down to Alexandria, leaves his ships there parked in Abu Qir. He gets to Alexandria, 47,000 men. He's going to march down to Cairo. Do you know what? They never, ever anticipated the heat. And as these 40,000 men march down to Cairo, literally hundreds and hundreds of his soldiers put guns to their head and committed suicide because of the heat and lack of water. And he got down to Cairo, brothers and sisters. And when he was down there, yes, he went up to Palestine. He had a few wars in Palestine. And do you know what? While he was in Palestine, you know what Napoleon said? He said, you know what? I think it's time now for me to take steps to allow Israel to come back to the Holy Land. And when Britain heard that, they were horrified. They could not bear the idea of the French being in Palestine And that moved the British very, very quickly. They were going to be the ones to auspice the entrance of Israel into Napoleon said, yes, I think we should bring the Jewish people back into the land of Palestine. What an amazing thing. But while he's down in Cairo, he's now got 30,000 men left. While he's there, along comes Nelson. Nelson and Napoleon's fleets, they were streaming all over the Mediterranean. In fact, they passed each other in the night. They didn't know. They didn't have radar. They didn't have smartphones. They didn't know. So there was Nelson going around. He knew Napoleon was on the move somewhere. And Nelson's going around the Mediterranean, and Napoleon gets into Alexandria. Well, while Napoleon was down in Cairo, Nelson comes to the Bay of Africa and he sees all of these ships. Blew the lot of them. And here's Napoleon stranded down there in Egypt with 30,000 men. As we said a moment ago, he's got to leave there, and he's got to put a disguise on and get back to Europe. Because while he was down there in Egypt, a coalition of European states against France was taking place. That's how the Brits, the second Vial, overarched, causing Napoleon to say, I shouldn't be here. I should be back there. God said, shouldn't be. Should be back in the past. All right, here's the third Vial. And the third angel pointed his bolt on the rivers and fountains of waters, and they became blood. Here would be, brothers and sisters, 27-year-old Major General Napoleon. Stop picking out the offsprings from northern Italy, southern Switzerland. Now, Napoleon is going to come down from Paris. He's going to pick up a few guys down there in Toulon. He's going to move into this area of Piedmont. Now, we looked at this verse when we started our study. They were given blood to drink because they were worthy. And that verse 6 is particularly and peculiarly relevant to the third Bible. Because in this area of Piedmont, the Catholics were responsible for absolute carnage of the Albigenses and the Waldenses. Men and women who wanted to read their Bible and serve God as best they could. And the Catholics couldn't stand the Waldenses, couldn't stand the Albigenses, and persecuted them mercilessly. And here, in this area of fountains and rivers and waters, blood flowed because of the Catholics, persecuting the Albigenses and the Waldenses. God said, God did not forget. God said, I have a task for this man to bring vengeance on those people because of what they did to those two classes of people. So Napoleon's on, the brothers and sisters and young people, before we go with him on a couple of minute journey into this third Bible, I just want to spend a minute or two just to show you what this man was about. To show you kind of like the flavour of Napoleon, so you understand what happened when he went to kick out the Ottomans. And it goes like this. Napoleon, just to get the feel of it, Napoleon was born in 1769. He died in 1821. He was 52. When he was 9 years old, he enters the French military school. And when he was there at the French military school as a 9-year-old, the other kids teased him. They kicked him around because he spoke funny. He had this thick Corsican accent. And because these other kids tormented him, it caused Napoleon to withdraw and become antisocial. And he withdrew into his books, particularly mathematics. In fact, there was one instructor there that said, you are a very studious young man. You would make a very good naval officer in the British Navy. No way. God's not going to let him go to the British Navy. He's going to fight the British Navy. So here he is, he's a 9-year-old, and he's becoming antisocial, and he's withdrawing into his books, particularly mathematics. The times he was social, he dominated. Surprise, surprise. Well, he was Napoleon, brothers and sisters and young people. He's now 16 years of age, and he's commissioned as second lieutenant in 1785. And then when he's 23, at the time when France became a republic in 1792, he's promoted to captain. Now, where's the French Revolution? The French Revolution is there. Napoleon was 20 when that revolution broke out in Revelation 11. Now, here he's 23 and he's a captain. Well, When he's 24 in 1793, he's made Brigadier General. 1793, that's the time when there was the reign of terror going on in France. And here we are, 4 years after the revolution broke out, and people in France are sick to death of the revolution. They're sick to death of the Inquisition. They're sick to death of the guillotine. They're sick to death of the blood. They're sick to death of everything. The revolution was supposed to be their salvation. All it's bringing is grief. And therefore, in Paris, in 1793, when Napoleon's 24, in Paris, there's this groundswell, and there's 25,000 people in Paris walking through the streets chanting, "We want the king back. We want the monarchy. We want the Bourbons. We want Louis. We don't want the French Revolution." It's a mob. It's a crazed mob. And the government are going, "It's a mob. How do we deal with a mob?" I know. We'll get Napoleon. He might only be 5'6", but he knows how to deal with a crazed mob. And so Napoleon comes on the scene, brothers and sisters, and he says to his mate, "Get a cannon." His mate says, "What are you going to do?" He said, "Watch." So this mob are charging through the streets of Paris, 25, "We want Louis back." And Napoleon says, "Mate, put it in the street." "What are you going to do?" "Watch." And they come around the corner, he says, "Let it off." Boom, the cannon goes off. And through his own people, he kills 200 people in one cannon shot. Brothers and sisters, they got problems on the border with the Prussians. They got problems on their border with the Russians. They got problems on the border with the Austrians. And here is Napoleon blowing his own people up with cannons in his own streets. Well, if you do that in Paris, they promote you. So what happened, brothers and sisters? He was promoted to Major General. So here he is, he's 26-year-old, he's Major General, nearly ready to go on to the third Vial campaign, nearly ready to go up to the area of the Alpine regions to kick out the Ottomans. Well, it wasn't a war for Napoleon. There was love in the end. And Napoleon came across this very old woman, 37 years old, and her name was Josephine. And at 27-year-old, she's 37, she's a widow, she's got 2 children, falls in love with Josephine, marries Josephine, spends a night or two with his new bride, says, "Darling, that's all, I've got to go, I have a war to fight." So off he goes to the third Vial in Revelation 6. He's off as 27-year-old Major General on his campaigns in Austria, in northern Italy. Now, just to finish off a little chart, 10 years after the revolution breaks out, Napoleon is 30, and in the coup d'etat, he seizes power as the first consul. Now, what you need to understand is this. In between here, him leaving Josephine and going off to the Alpine and him seizing power in 1799, in between there and there is when he went down to Egypt. Right? He comes back from his Alpine campaign, goes down to Egypt, then comes back and seizes power, having left his 30,000 men down in Egypt. That's how it works. All right, brothers and sisters, the third bowl poured out upon fountains and rivers and waters. And what Napoleon's going to do is going to deal with this area here. He's going to come down to Toulon, down there. He comes from Paris, down to Toulon, and he comes down to Toulon, he's got to pick up the Italian army. He gets down to Toulon, brothers and sisters and young people, and he comes to these blokes down there and he says, "Who are you?" They said, We're the Italian army." He said, "Where's your horses?" They said, "We ate them." He said, "Where's your guns?" They said, "We left them in the field of battle." What, brothers and sisters, you've never seen a ragtag, fallen, decrepit bunch of blokes and all that. They've eaten their horses. They don't know where their guns are, and he's got to take them up there to kick the Austrians out. I'd be going back to Joseph. I'd be saying, no way am I staying with you. 3 months he had to rip them into gear. 3 months. And by the charisma of his presence, by the electricity of his presence, he ripped them and whipped them into gear in 3 months and went up there, brothers and sisters, to unwittingly fulfill the third Vial. And there was a battle there, and then there was a battle there, and there were battles all over this area of fountains and rivers and waters as he fulfills the words of God in that quotation, brothers and sisters. Third angel poured out his Vial upon the rivers and fountains and waters, and they became blood. All right, let's deal with Pope. So he gives the Pope blood to drink by coming down, defeating Pope's forces at Pienza and Eclipse. Napoleon advanced on Rome, and the Pope soon. Well, he's coming back to Paris. He's finished his job in the third vial. He's coming back to Paris. And when he comes back to Paris, the people absolutely love him. His men would do anything for him. He is the man of the moment. Everyone loves this man, Napoleon. The government in France don't love him. The government in France is shaky, corrupt and unstable. They don't want Napoleon because he's too good. Napoleon has been over there in the third vial. Napoleon has been over there negotiating with the Pope. Napoleon has been over there negotiating with the King of Naples. Napoleon has been over there coding law. Napoleon has been over there carving up land. He's more than a military commander. He's not a politician. He's a government on the move. And the government in Paris don't want him. They want him out, fighting battles because it's good for the economy. And so therefore they say, what are you going to do? Go to England, they say. Napoleon says, nah, I've got a better idea. I don't have to defeat England on the Channel or over there on their island. The best way to defeat England is to go down to Egypt, Palestine, Constantinople, India, cut off England's life. So there he goes, brothers and sisters. He goes down to Egypt. After he's come back from his Alpine campaign. And while he's down in Egypt, in Napoleon's absence, the Austrians, with the help from Russia, retook Italy, and all that Napoleon did after he said goodbye to Josephine was all undone. It all unravelled. And therefore he had to leave his 30,000 men, as he said, and go back. And therefore, here he comes. He forsakes his army, returns to Paris, where by the turn of events he becomes the first consul after the coup d'etat of 1799. How's everybody going? Let's have a look. Yes, we should be finished in a minute or two. Mind you, you've got all day. And what time is lunch? I can name a couple of speakers that would take that offer up. This is not right. Let me tell you. All right, brothers and sisters. Now, just a couple of minutes. I want to show you something. I just want to do one more live. I'm not going to do it live. I could just say this better. I just want to show you this. This is amazing. This really is amazing. This is Napoleon, and this is the beginning of his end. So here we've got Napoleon. He's about to crown himself at Notre Dame. This would be the beginning of the end of Napoleon. And there he is in Notre Dame. He knew that there was a man 1,000 years ago who had crowned himself in Rome under the auspices of the Pope. Napoleon said, no, even though Charlemagne crowned himself 1,000 years ago, I'm not going to Rome. The Pope is coming to me. And so Napoleon says to the Pope, you come to Notre Dame and you sit and you watch this crowning process. But this was the beginning of the end of this man. Because there's the tapestry. I mean that I think most of us have seen. Big tapestry. Now, Christian and I had the privilege of being able to go to Notre Dame. And Chris and I stood there. And we looked up, and I said to Christine, I said, Napoleon's mother should have been sitting here, but she wasn't at the coronation. Napoleon's mum said, no, I'm not coming to the coronation. I don't like Josephine. I don't like the fact that she's going to be the next empress. No way am I coming. So when the painter began to paint this tapestry, the painter said, I'm painting this, your mother wasn't there. What do I do? Napoleon said, paint her in. And the painter said, well, what will she say? Napoleon said, she will thank me later. Paint her in. He did what he liked. You see the Pope there, brothers and sisters? He's got a little hand out there, looks like he's making a sign of the cross. No, he wasn't doing that. Napoleon said, you sit there, put your hands on your knees, don't move. You just watch, do nothing. When the painter started painting this painting, he said, oh, I did invite him over. I suppose you better get him to do something. Put his hand up there, maybe he's doing the sign of the cross. He did what he liked. Brothers and sisters, he might only have been 5'6", but he had the ego of an 8-foot giant. And this was going to be the undermining of Napoleon. This was going to be the beginning of the end. then launching. This is the one I want to share a couple of minutes with you, and then we'll wrap up that study. I love it. It's amazing how God has penned these words, and we read through the historical eyes of these writers. The fourth angel brought out his bowl upon the sun. He's off to Vienna. He's off to bring an end to the empire that had existed for 1,000 years, the Holy Roman Empire. Now, the sun, in Scripture, we know the sun represents political power. In Psalm 89 and verse 36, we read of the Lord Jesus Christ, the Son, S-U-N, who would take upon himself in the age to come political power. We know in Revelation 8 and verse 12 that the sun would be eclipsed. It would be the eclipsing of the Roman world. We know Revelation 12 and verse 1, the woman would be clothed with the sun. So this is political power. Therefore, brothers and sisters and young people, the sun of Europe had been the Holy Roman Empire since 800 AD. And Napoleon is going to take out the sun. He's going to take out the Holy Roman Empire. Now look at this. I want you to focus. Just be with me for a minute or two. Think about this. Charlemagne brought the Holy Roman Empire in that Napoleon's going to take out. Charlemagne, Napoleon, and the sun. You've got Charlemagne, Napoleon, and the sun. What's all that got to do all wrapped up together? Particularly when we think about the way in which the sun is portrayed in Revelation 12, where Rome would be clothed, the Roman Catholic Church would be clothed with the sun. So what's Revelation 12 clothing with the sun got to do with Charlemagne, got to do with Napoleon, all wrapped up together? Have a look at this. If you go to the birthplace of Charlemagne, brought in the Holy Roman Empire, the sun, you'll find that Charlemagne in Aachen, born in Aachen, built that temple. Did Charlemagne. Now there is Aachen there in Germany, the birthplace of the one that started the Holy Roman Empire that Napoleon's going to take out. There's his birthplace in Aachen. There's the cathedral that he built. So what? Let's go inside. As we go inside that cathedral, notwithstanding the amazing stained glass, look at that. That is a woman clothed with the sun. Who put that there? Charlemagne. Who brought in the Holy Roman Empire? Who is the sun, which Napoleon's going to take out in the fourth bowl upon the sun. And there, he got that in Charlemagne out of Revelation 12. And under that sun, in the cathedral of the birthplace of the one that brought in the sun, no less than 32 emperors of the sun were crowned. You've got to let that flow over it and do some research. That is absolutely amazing. And therefore, from 1438 through 1806, the rulers of the sun, the Holy Roman Empire, came almost invariably from Austria, where Napoleon said, ruling Austria was regarded as the ruler of the Holy Roman Empire. So he's going up to take out the sun. And the Bible calls him, brothers and sisters, and we can jump. The Bible calls him the fourth angel pointed his fire on the sun. And power was given to him, Napoleon, to scorch men with fire. You know, when Napoleon was down in Egypt and he fought with the Malignants, there were rules in Egypt at that time. They fought at what they called the Battle of the Pyramids, 2 hours. They called it the Battle of the Pyramids. But actually, the battle was fought in a vegetable patch. Carrots, celeries, lettuces. Could you imagine reading a history book saying Napoleon was infamous? He defeated the Mamelukes in the Battle of the Vegetable Patch. Not very romantic. But there were pyramids in the distance. So the historians said, no, that's better. We'll call it the 2-hour battle, the Battle of the Pyramids. And so there was Napoleon, and he was down there fighting the Mamelukes. And he defeated the Mamelukes in the 2-hour battle of the Pyramids, which was fought in the vegetable patch. Now look, the historian, you know how we talk about Belloc in the French Revolution? He said the Huguenots remain as a powerful and ever-watchful body. Remember that we did that last time? Have a look at this historian writing this. With the angels moving her pen, Henrietta Marsh writes about the Battle of the Pyramids. Many of the Mamelukes threw themselves into the Nile in panic. Many were cut down by the pursuing French. Those who escaped the Malignants carried to all parts of Egypt the fame and terror of Sultan Kabir, the king of fire. And the English tabloids, when they were writing about Napoleon jaunting across Europe, they called him a man of fire, because he put cannons and he arrayed the cannons in such a way that when he let them off, it was like fire surrounding Napoleon. What an amazing. And God says he's coming to take out the sun. And he would be scorching men with fire. What an amazing thing. Well, brothers and sisters, in the fifth bowl, Napoleon would take out the papacy. Well, God's now going to break him as once. After he took out the papacy and darkened that kingdom, he had 6 years left. 3 years, he's off to Russia. Bad move. 3 years later, he's defeated at Waterloo on June the 18th, 1850. And he's exiled to the remote Atlantic islands of Lena. Napoleon died in 1821, and he's 52. John Thomas is 16 when Napoleon died. No wonder. As a teenage boy, John Thomas is reading the English tabloids of the jaunts of Napoleon. Revelation 16. No wonder when Brother Thomas was converted. No wonder when he became a faithful follower of the Lord Jesus Christ. No wonder when he wrote books like Eureka, his pen was on fire. And he wrote about a man of fire, Brother Thomas. God raised up Napoleon. Yes, God raised up brethren like Brother Thomas, that he might inspire us with his faithful study of the Word of God and his faithful life lived in the service of Jesus Christ and of his brethren. Well, brothers and sisters and young people, as we conclude, if the French Revolution had not happened, as awful as it was in Revelation 11, if the wars in Europe did not take place, as horrendous as they were, as recorded in Revelation 16, if the church and state had not been separated, you and I would not be here this afternoon. We would not be allowed to open our Bibles and read with the knowledge that we have. What an amazing thing. God and the angels were at work, brothers and sisters. And God willing, in our study tomorrow afternoon, we're going to move from the arena of history that has been for us, prophecy for those before. We're going to move from the arena of history and we're going to move into the sixth Bible and see our role, brothers and sisters, in the present day and in the future to come. God willing, we'll pick up that study under the theme